Hi, I'm Rachel Gray, and today we're going to go over how to make a crostata. A crostata in Italy is like a pie, but they don't really have pie. So most of the time it's, low like a tart and tight, but today we're going to make a free-form crostata. So what we're going to need first is to make our dough, and then we'll make the filling second. So you're going to need a cup and a half of flour. And I'm just going to put them right into the food processor because I'm going to need to cut my butter into my flour. So I find the easiest way to do that is with the food processor. So a cup and a half of flour and then 2 tablespoons of sugar. You want a little sweetness to go in. 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then we just need a little bit of salt, half a teaspoon. I'm using kosher. I like kosher salt. It measures a little bit differently than regular salt, but you can kind of just do it straight across and you'll still be okay. And then 3 tablespoons, or a third of a cup of cold butter. So it's 5 1/3 tablespoons. And then what I do is I just take my butter and I'm gonna cut it into like smaller pieces so that it cuts in faster. And you can cut the butter with a pastry cutter. You know how they have those little wire ones that cut it in, or 2 forks, or but I find, like I said, the easiest way for me to do it is with a handy food processor. And I'm only going to use, I do it for pie as well, but I'm only going to use my food processor just to cut in the butter. And then when I add the water and the egg that are going to go into this pastry, I'm just going to put those in by hand. Just find it works out a little bit better. You could do it all in the food processor if you wanted to. And so I'm just going to use the pulse button here. And I'm just going to do it until I've got a nice, coarse kind of pea size. That ought to do. Okay, so now I'm going to take the flour mixture that I've cut the butter into and just put it into this bowl. And put that aside. So I'm going to take 1/3 of a cup of cold water and measure that in. And then I'm going to take 1 egg and add that to it. And then I'm just going to whisk those together. And then I'm going to add it to my flour mixture and mix that together. So I'm just going to mix that in with the fork until I have a nice dough. I'm going to have to finish it with my hands, but I'll start with my fork. And it's going to kind of look like that for a minute. And you're going to think, oh, you need more water, but you don't. So we're just going to mix that together with our hands. Mix it up until you have a nice, even, smooth dough. And then what we'll do is put it in the refrigerator until we need it. And then we'll make the filling. Then we'll roll it all out, put it all together. So it kind of looks like that. And then we're just going to work it in the rest of the way. Just kind of knead it in the bowl. That's kind of what I do. And then we'll put it in the refrigerator just to keep it nice and cold because we want that butter to stay cold. Yeah, there we go. So nice and even. Just kind of flatten it out into a little disc so it's easier to roll out. And then put it in the refrigerator and then they'll be ready when we need it. Okay, now for our filling, we're going to need 3 apples. And I like to use a variety of apples. I usually use 2 Fuji and then 1 Granny Smith. So what I do to make it easier is I use a potato peeler, and I just peel the skin off of the apple with the potato peeler, and then I'll cut the apple. So to make it go easily and quickly, I just kind of take it down the side like that. So it goes faster. I take off the top, then I go down the sides, because the object is to make this as painless as possible. And then I go off the bottom. And what I do too is I kind of leave the bottom like this. So you can kind of, I just take it straight across. And that helps me when I cut it. So this is how I cut my apple. Just get rid of this. You know how when you go to the store, the fancy chocolate stores, and they have caramel covered apples, and they cut them for you, and they cut them like that? So I do the same thing. I just leave the core, and I use this guide on the top where I left. That kind of lets me know where the core is and where the apple is, and then that way I don't have to worry about, you know, getting the core on the inside, that hard part. And then I just take my apple and I just slice it. So I usually take the biggest part first, and then I'll do the smaller ones. And where they're cut straight, I just start right there and then just cut across. And I try to make them as evenly as I can. Flying all over the place. And I don't let them get in my way. I just kind of press forward. And then the last one. It's a little trickier because it's smaller, but there. So that's how I do all of my apples. And once they're all done, I'll put them in a bowl all together. And once you add sugar to your apples, then it will immediately start to break them down, and they'll kind of turn into a sauce. So I don't add the sugar until I'm ready. And in order to be ready, then I roll out my dough first, and then I'll add my sugar, and then I'll put it all together. So let me show you how we're going to do that. Okay, so I have my dough out of the refrigerator, and then I take a silicone baking mat, or also known as a silpat, and I just put a little flour on my silpat. And you're going to find, especially for this particular application, a silpat is really important to have, a baking mat. Rather than parchment paper, as it cooks, it kind of oozes all over the place. And so this silicone, it'll just peel right off. It's really kind of fantastic. So I'm going to take my rolling pin, and this rolling pin happens to be from my grandmother. And it's a marble one, which is nice because when you want to keep things cold, the marble will help things stay cold. So, and then you just kind of want to roll it out and have it be longer rather than fatter, kind of to fit the pan. And it doesn't need to be precise in any way. It just kind of can go where it goes. And you want it kind of thin, and you want it to go all the way to the edge of the silpat. Even though our crostata is not going to go all the way to the edge, we'll have our dough go all the way to the edge, and then we'll just fold it over our filling. I'll show you. Okay, so it's done. Now we're ready to put our filling together. We need 3 tablespoons of flour. That's going to kind of hold it together, and the more flour you have, the less kind of seepage you're going to get, and the more sort of sauce you're going to get around your apples. And then I've got 3/4 cup of sugar, and then we'll need a little cinnamon. And also when you do your apples, you know, they can turn brown if you leave them too long. There's some ways around that. You can do some lemon, which I like, especially for this particular application, because a little bit of tartness is good. That's kind of why I like 1 Granny Smith, because it's a little tart among the other sweet. And then you could also use cream of tartar in the water, or you can use fruit fresh, or you know, whatever the kind of things. But with this particular apple recipe, Because the apples have cinnamon on them, they're going to be brown anyway. So it doesn't really matter if they're perfectly white. So if you leave them for a minute, that's fine. But as I said, the reason I want to kind of put off combining them until this is ready is because they will immediately start to juice out. And so we want to keep all of it in that we can. So we just kind of save it for the last minute. And then we want to just put it in a nice hot oven and then get it cooking right away so we don't lose all of that yummy goodness to the bottom of our parchment or silpat. And I highly recommend a silpat. So just kind of stir that together. Once everything's kind of coated and lovely, then what I do is I just take the apples and I just pour them over the silpat. And I just kind of arrange them so that they're in the middle, like that. Okay, and before we fold it, we want to put a few little pats of butter down on top of it. This kind of helps marry it all together, plus it makes the apples that are exposed not quite so dry. All right, so I kind of cut it in just a couple of tablespoons into little cubes, and I just kind of dot it all over the apples. A few more here. There we go. Okay, and then we just fold the pastry over the apples, and it doesn't have to be a certain way. Just kind of cover them like that. And then we're gonna just do a quick egg wash over and some sugar in the raw, or Turbinado sugar, and it's kind of a bigger sugar and it looks really pretty on the top. So for the egg wash we need an egg and a little bit of water. Then we'll mix that together just to get a little egg wash. This makes it shiny and it makes the sugar stick to it. So before I do that, I'm going to put it on my pan. Baking sheet here. This just lifts up, just like it is. Yep. Then we're just going to egg wash the pastry that we're seeing. The pastry brush. Okay, beautiful. Okay, and now we'll take this turbinado sugar, and mine is just in a little pour container, which I really like. It sprinkles pretty easy. Okay, and that was it. And now we're going to put it in the oven. It cooks at 375 for about 40 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. Check back as soon as we're done. Okay, so it's been about 40 minutes, and I've taken my crostata out of the oven. And you can see that it is beautifully browned, and it's got the beautiful sugar on it. It's gorgeous. And the nice thing about the silpat is if you lift it up, normally this, where it leaks out, would be like a little train wreck, but because it's on a silpat, it'll just slide right off. It's a fantastic dessert, and people love it. Affectionately at work, it's called the apple thing. But people really do love it, and I love it so much more than a pie, simply because pie and I don't always get along. Just making the crust all perfect and having it all come out just sometimes doesn't work out for me. So this always works out, and because it's freeform, you really can't miss. It always looks good. So try this. I think you'll really like it, and it's super easy. And you can find this recipe and many more like it on my blog, cookingwithrachel101.com.